A fatal police shooting prompts lots of questions. Welcome to Columbus on the Record. The fatal police shooting of a pregnant black woman has reignited protest over the use of deadly force and prompted questions about police transparency. A Blendon Township police officer shot and killed 21-year-old Takaya Young August 24th outside a Westerville supermarket. Police confronted Young after a store employee accused her of stealing alcohol. They had confronted her in a parking lot. In a statement released the next day, the day after the shooting, Blendon Township Police Chief John Belford said the woman refused commands to get out of the car before shooting.
The woman put the car in gear and accelerated forward. The officer, who was directly in the path of the oncoming car, fired one shot through the front windshield. The body camera footage that I've reviewed also confirms that the officer was directly in the path of the car.
It took another week for police to release that body camera footage of the shooting. Here it is. I'll warn you, it is graphic and disturbing.
Out of the car.
7 back in service, 1828.
Get out of the car. Then get out. No, then get out.
Get out of the car.
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 Your shots fired.
Shots fired. Stop the car. Stop the car.
We're going to have a 44 on.
Blendon Township Police refused to release the name of the officer, citing a state law that protects crime victims. The family wants that officer prosecuted for murder. Desiree Timms, as you watch that video, what are your thoughts?
First, my heart and prayers go out to the Young family. This is something that happens so often, unfortunately, in our community and around the country. We're seeing this play out over and over again. And the question that many people have is shoplifting, is $5, is whatever command that said person is not following, is that worth their life? And there has to be other decisions made by officers when they are in those positions, because we have seen through evidence and through case studies and lots of literature, when officers are faced with white people, they choose other options, and it is not shooting to kill. And in that case, I mean, shoot the tire, something. I think, and that's what everyone's asking. Why couldn't you have aimed for a different part of the car?
When you see that video, what do you think? Was it justified?
I think this is a huge tragedy. I am pro law enforcement, but I'm also pro investing in training. And I think what's devastating is if viewers look at the entire video, this young woman is turning the steering wheel extremely to the right to avoid the officer. And the two elements you need truly to prove if this was reasonable is, first, was the officer, did he reasonably feel that he was in present danger? And then secondly, would an objective person, another officer in his position, feel the same way? It's very difficult to say yes to those two when you look at the video and you see her actively turning away from the officer.
Let's look at the Blendon Township use of force policy, which was released also this week. The use of force policy in Blendon Township says when feasible, officers should take reasonable steps. This is the use of force policy with regards to moving vehicles. When feasible, officers should take reasonable steps to move out of the path of an approaching vehicle instead of discharging their firearm at the vehicle or any of its occupants. An officer should only discharge a firearm at a moving vehicle or its occupants when the officer reasonably believes there are no other reasonable means available to avert the imminent threat of the vehicle, or if deadly force other than the vehicle is directed at the officer or others. And the policy goes on to say, to Desiree's point, they are instructed not to shoot at the car to disable it. So, Julie, now it's up to a judge, prosecutors to decide, first on a policy issue, did the officer violate policy, and was it a criminal act?
Right, as Desiree is saying, we have seen these incidents so many times, and someone had said, maybe it was one of your panelists, recently was sort of like, does the officer have a moment of, I don't want to be the next white officer to shoot a black victim and then have it be this ordeal that's going to unfold now? That, I mean, it could be any kind of punishment, losing their job, whatever. And I know that the police unions are, defending their members, and they're doing a job. They're protecting public safety, and they need to be there. But do these decisions get revisited at a granular level? And do we have the policies in place to really bring justice here?
Desiree, if you look back, I mean, there was an allegation of shoplifting. Police have released video that sort of indicates that she at least took alcohol from the store without paying for it. She refused to get out of the car. Did she play any role in escalating the situation?
Well, I don't think anytime, these are crimes of poverty, right? We saw this happen with George Floyd with, a fake $20 bill. I don't think it matters what she did. It wasn't worth her life. And when we pay officers to protect our communities and keep us safe, there has to be a line of respect there and a respect for life. And I think in this situation, the officer did not respect her life. And I mean, before they had video, the officers were informed that she may have been shoplifting. It wasn't even as if they watched her do it. They didn't have actual proof at that moment. And still he pulled the trigger. And we have to see consequences, because whenever these officers don't face consequences, other officers, even if they don't have hate in their heart, they aren't trained, or, they don't feel the need to think differently when they are in these situations.
Getting back to the transparency issue here, this shooting happened on a Thursday. That video that we showed of the police chief's statement came out the next day. It was scripted. He was reading from his prepared statement. He used words like the woman's car accelerated. It was an oncoming car towards the officer, and the officer was directly in the path of the car. A week later, that was a narrative for a week, that she was accelerating her car towards the officer. Technically, that's true, but it was slowly rolling towards the officer, correct? Is that not as transparent as we would like it to be?
It's not only slowly rolling, but as I've said, she was actively turning the wheel away from the officer. And I think, look, the union and the police chief, it's incumbent upon them to provide an affirmative defense when you have a situation like this, and they're going to have to prove there was clear and present danger and a reasonable officer would have pulled a gun. But I think Ohioans can see the truth. We have a video, we have a young woman who is pregnant, and there's no justification for breaking the law. Regardless of your skin color, we have laws in the United States. We need to make sure that we are respecting them. But the other side of this is reasonable force, and what that policy truly means. It is not reasonable force, and I think it's going to be very hard for the officers in the union to prove that.
And we've seen an expert in these sorts of forensic situations who said that officer didn't need to place himself even in front of the car. The car was parked, but they were sort of trying to block her in with their bodies, it seems. And so was he, I understand they'll have to look at the question of, did he place himself in danger as opposed to her placing him in danger? Right.
Oh, but real quickly, the Marsy's Law. We passed that in 2017. It's designed to protect crime victims. Police are now using it pretty regularly to shield officers' names in instances like this. Is that how the law, that's not what I recall what we voted on in 2017.
I don't think, no. I think that when you're having a narrative about crime victims, you're talking about people who are civilians being attacked or offended upon by other civilians, not police being suggested that they're a victim of one of the people who they're trying to enforce the law against.
Yeah, we'll have to see if that is challenged. My guess is it'll be challenged in the not too distant future. Our next topic, the Ohio Redistricting Commission meets next week to draw state legislative districts. This week, Democrats gave up their court fight against congressional districts drawn for last year's election. Democrats and their allies asked the Ohio Supreme Court to drop their lawsuit, which claimed the maps were unfairly gerrymandered. They said voters deserve clarity for the upcoming election. but they also may want to keep the maps, which help them increase their share of the Ohio congressional delegation. Julie Carr, is this a case of Democrats, I want to say quitting while they're ahead, but quitting while they're ahead of where they were 2 years ago?
Yes, I mean, I think that definitely the situation with the map under which we voted last year, Democrats won 5 of 15 congressional districts. Under our old system, they had 4 of 16 districts. We lost 1 district. So they went from a quarter, 25%, to a third, 33.33%. And, you know, so that wasn't bad for them. They netted some wins, and they were also looking at the makeup of the redistricting commission, which is identical, the makeup of the Ohio Supreme Court, which is even more conservative than it was when they fought this, won it, and then couldn't get it enforced last time. So it's not even like they fought a losing battle, they fought a winning one.
Heck, would Republicans have, if they had the chance to draw those congressional maps again, would they have said, you know, we don't want to give up 5 seats. We're going to draw these districts a little differently to make it better for Republicans?
I think Republicans are just trying to follow the law here. And what this truly tells us is these far leftist groups and Democrats who screamed up and down that our maps were gerrymandered now suddenly have a change of heart. And that's truly because politics was driving some of the decisions coming out of the Ohio Supreme Court. We have a balanced decision out of the U.S. Supreme Court and an Ohio Supreme Court today that is going to follow the rule of law. So it's very interesting to see the hypocritical nature of the extreme left today. But at the end of the day, I think Republicans are doing what's right. They believe that map was constitutional. They're putting it forth, and they're trying to create transparency for voters, which is so important today.
I think they still think they're gerrymandered, but they're just not going to fight this round, Desiree, because they will have to draw new maps after 2024 because under the law, because it didn't get bipartisan support, it only lasts 4 years and not 10.
That's right. And the map is still heavily gerrymandered. When you look at Franklin County, look at Columbus, for example, people have different representatives depending on where they live in the Columbus region. Cincinnati, Hamilton County is still not its own district, right? They still have other parts of Southwest Ohio thrown in there. So when you look at it in totality, it is still very much gerrymandered. But to the point is that Democrats did win a few of those seats, and they were still uphill battles despite those wins. And so we've seen recent reports come out and have those districts, for example, Ohio 1 in Cincinnati and Marcy Kaptur's district and Ohio 9 be rated as toss-ups even still.
Julie, the redistricting commission meets this week for the first time since the last time they met back before the election of 2022. Do we expect them to change the state maps at all, make little tweaks to them? Because we do have a new Supreme Court, which is more likely to approve them.
Right. I mean, I honestly don't know what to expect, but that particular map has been submitted twice, shot down twice. But the argument of the Republican side has been, you know, we are using the criteria that are in that constitutional amendment, and they felt that Maureen O'Connor, the Chief Justice, the last time around was setting a bar higher and higher and higher for them in each of these rejections. So it could be that they take it, they send it back, and they just see if the new court is more sympathetic.
Do we know, the new justice is Joe Deters, replacing Maureen O'Connor. Do we know where he stands on this? Could he be another swing vote?
We actually don't know. He's untested. He hasn't been a judge before. And we also know that sometimes on courts, you know, a different justice shows up. It might be Pat Fisher this time who says, you know, I'm going to stick with the letter of the Constitution in certain cases because you have to uphold the Constitution if there isn't cover there from some other justices.
Okay, we'll see what happens. They have to move quickly because the March primary, 2024 primary, is creeping up on us, and candidates need to know where they're going to run and which voters they're going to have to convince to vote for them. Anyway, with Labor Day behind us, the fall campaign of 2023 will soon begin. Issue number 1 on the ballot and in the minds of most Ohio voters is the proposed abortion rights amendment. It would enshrine abortion rights in the Constitution without restrictions up to the point of fetal viability. This week, abortion rights supporters went to court to appeal the ballot board's decision to rewrite the ballot language to replace the word fetus with unborn child and make some other changes. Also, the Guttmacher Institute released a study this week that showed since the Dobbs decision, Ohio has seen an 8% increase in abortions performed in the state since 2020. Other states where abortion remains legal saw much larger increases. Julie Carr-Smythe, first to the ballot language. Do Democrats have in their allies and abortion rights supporters, do they have a good shot of winning this case, and will they win it in time before the ballots are printed?
Well, I can only use the August election as an example. Groups challenged that language as not objective enough, and they won that suit. I believe it was unanimous, and they had to go back and fix certain things about the August ballot issue before voters saw it. In this case, it seems to me to be pretty far afield from what the actual amendment says, the proposed ballot language that came out of the board and as written by Frank LaRose. So who knows what they might say, but there is that precedent.
Mecca, is this just another tactic? You look at trying to raise the threshold of passage to 60%. There's been other challenges on the fringes on this issue, this being the latest, changing the language to more loaded language. Is this just throwing everything at the wall, trying to defeat this proposal rather than just debate it on its merits?
Well, I think if we truly debated it on its merits, we would call this the Anti-Parent Amendment. It's about much more than abortion. The ACLU and leftist activist groups are truly trying to eviscerate parental consent. They want for on-demand abortions of minors and transgender surgeries. And just this week, the Human Rights Campaign, the largest transgender organization in the United States, has come out and said that they openly support issue 1, that they want reproductive care for minors, transgender surgeries, cross-sex hormone therapy. We have been saying all along from day one, there should be parental consent. If this is truly about abortion, use the word woman. There's a lack of clarity and ambiguity on purpose because there's an attack for parental rights today. So I don't believe we can argue anything on the merit today because we constantly have a backlash from the left saying, no, this isn't about parental rights. Well, this week, I hope reporters talk about the fact that the Human Rights Campaign is actively engaging war against all parents in Ohio.
Desiree, your response?
Well, one aspect is this is definitely about more than abortion. It's about family planning. It's about women having the right to choose. It's about what happens in hospitals when a woman needs to have a medicated assisted abortion if the fetus is no longer viable. This is about physicians in this state feeling comfortable performing abortions and not being ridiculed or attacked or forced to leave the state because they're threatened to lose their license or worse, be imprisoned. This is a really big deal for families, which is why it's complicated and wonky as the language was in August. The Democrats won. It was much more than just Democrats. It was a broad coalition, but the Democratic issue won because people understand what abortion means for their families and their households.
The issue of parental rights, that could be challenged in court under this amendment, but the reproductive rights extending to transgender care and gender-affirming care, the legal analysts have thrown doubt on that, right, Julie?
Right. I mean, it's possible that one form of transgender care, which would be IVF or fertility treatment, is clearly named in there. And sometimes when people have a transgender surgery, they want to freeze their eggs, for example, or something like that, so that they can still have children. But from the most of the legal scholars that I've talked to, other than Mehek herself, who was in my story, but they are talking about how reproductive care, as it's described there, often means and should mean, in a legal sense, reproduction, about pregnancy, having a pregnancy, not having a pregnancy, continuing a pregnancy, ending a pregnancy, or saving a pregnancy in the case of, or saving the life of the woman in a case of a miscarriage.
Desiree, the abortion rate goes up a bit in Ohio, not surprising as people in states like Indiana come to Ohio for abortions because they are heavily restricted in their home states. Ohio saw an 8% increase, which is, compared to other states, pretty slight, but still an increase in Ohio. That is a message that anti-abortion rights folks will be using in this campaign.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, women in other states and people are trying to flee to access services and care that they need, often life-saving care, and they have to travel to Ohio to get that. I'll tell you, I heard from our friends up north that Ohioans are traveling to Michigan for care. And so you have this issue where there's an emergency, an healthcare emergency, and families and people are being forced to flee and find healthcare services in different states around the country where they can get the care that they need. And that's really sad. It's causing financial hardship and a lot of trauma. And so I think even if the anti-abortion advocates use this, it's to our benefit to tell the stories of people who have to go seek healthcare in other states, the same way people in America flee to Canada to access lower prescription drugs.
The heck, anti-abortion or anti-abortion rights folks are using the term abortion tourism. Is that a bit strong to describe people crossing state lines to get an abortion?
Well, they're shopping for a state that's friendlier, but truly, if we talk about Michigan today, they passed access to abortion, full access. We don't have to look very far to see now, just this week, a Democrat representative has put on a legislative effort to abolish all health and safety standards for women. So they're eviscerating just even basic healthcare standards, 24-hour waiting period, consent. They're getting rid of parental rights. That's not what Ohio families want today. We want to be in the driver's seat. We want to be able to work with our doctors, but we also want parental consent. We want to protect our children from what's happening today. And when you have the largest group, HRC, Human Rights Campaign, coming after our children. They're the same group that's saying preschoolers should learn about transgender ideology. They're the same group that talked about Dylan Maloney and basically the demise of Bud Light. We don't need them in our state. We don't need them telling
for explicit lessons.
They are
advocating.
They're advocating for preschoolers to read certain books that are absolutely inappropriate. I think when you're 18, make those decisions, but leave our parents out of a extreme ballot initiative. And you know what? This group has learned, the ACLU learned, because they have the same initiative in Florida. And let me tell you, in Florida, they added the state legislature may insert parental consent. Where's our consent, Ohio? We need to protect the moral fabric of our families.
Desiree, last word, and then we'll move on to the next topic.
This is a huge issue. It's very easy to understand. I think Democrats and Ohioans will have a huge victory in November, and they're going to mop the floor with opponents because this is a kitchen table issue and it's very easily explainable. And people want access to health care, and they want to make those decisions for themselves in their hospital room.
The ads, no doubt, will begin soon. Our last topic, Wayne National Forest may get a new name. It's named for Revolutionary War General Anthony Wayne, also known as Mad Anthony Wayne for his bold personality and military tactics. He's also known for his fight against Native Americans, which resulted in their expulsion from Ohio. Native American groups have long called for the name change, and the federal government is studying it. The alternative is Buckeye National Forest. Heck, Cook, should we change the name?
I strongly oppose this. I think we are continuing to allow the Biden administration and a lot of extreme leftists erase our history. Now is an opportunity to not only honor a man, we wouldn't be here without him. We wouldn't be in Ohio, just like we wouldn't have the United States without George Washington. Now is the time to truly honor our history and to learn from it, to move forward. But if we continue to rename sports teams, public parks, getting rid of statues, allowing our children to be renamed in school based on their general preferences, what are we left with today?
More Native Americans would live here if it weren't for the war that that General Wayne was involved in, right, Julie?
Right, and the issue as well in terms of modern times is that American Indian tribes work very closely with the U.S. Forest Service. This is, for some, it's a treaty-based relationship. For others, it's just an interest-based relationship. So the question is sort of, in the case of a forest, you know, do you want to have a military general's name on it, or do you want something more neutral? Mm-hmm. The Forest Service is talking about that perhaps, you know, it's painful for these tribal representatives to have to engage and mention this name every time they deal with the service.
Desiree, Revolutionary War era folks have a complicated histories. Many owned slaves. There was the war with Native Americans. Should we consider all that and keep the names and teach people, or should we change the name?
We should absolutely change the name. And you can still change the name and still teach history, right? But we don't have to honor oppressors. We don't have to honor dictators. We don't have to honor people who did not honor people who look like me. And so, no, I don't want to be reminded every time I walk into a room or a building and look at a statue of someone who would have killed me or enslaved me or worse. I would like to learn about that history so history doesn't repeat itself, but we don't need to honor the tragedy.
Okay, let's get to our final off-the-record parting shots. And Desiree Timms, you're up first.
Yeah, so upcoming this fall is more football, and so I'm excited to see what happens here in the state with our new quarterback at OSU and see what excitement we get here between the Buckeyes and down in Cincinnati with the Bengals.
Okay. Mehek.
I'm going to echo what Desiree just said. We were talking football before we started. I think Ohio State is going to have a fantastic year.
Okay. And Julie.
I'm just, after this discussion, I'm looking forward to a lot more explaining of the fall ballot issue. About months and months of it. But
Yes. Yeah, and those OSU football games are going to be not only filled with great plays, we hope, but also they're going to be filled with a lot of political ads. My prediction is, General Wayne is said to haunt parts of Pennsylvania for some reason. Not quite sure why he's haunting them. Get mad at him. I predict that he will haunt the now Wayne National Forest, should they change the name. That's my prediction. That is Columbus on the Record for this week. Continue the conversation on Facebook. You can watch us anytime, as a reminder, at our website, wosu.org/COTR, or you can check us out on the PBS video app. Download it today if you have not already. For our crew and our panel, I'm Mike Thompson. Have a good week.